This is Right On Radio, the voice of the vast right-wing conspiracy.
Welcome to Right On Radio. My name is Daniel Friberg.
And I'm John Morgan.
And I'm Jonas de Geer.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about current events. And John, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit what you've been up to the latest week and what's happening in general in Hungary.
Yeah, sure. The interesting thing for people who don't live in Hungary that they probably don't know about is that after the First World War, the Hungarian government, like many Western countries, designated a day. In Hungary's case, it was always the last Sunday in May. It's what they call the Hősök Napi, or that means Heroes' Day in Hungarian. And it's not specifically only for the First World War, although that was what inspired it, but it's to honor all of the Hungarian war dead from all of the wars. So for American listeners, it's similar to American Memorial Day. So on Sunday, I was invited to attend an event that was held in a park here in Budapest by the nationalist organization HVIM. And for those people who don't know, that stands for the 64 Counties movement. They're a large metapolitical nationalist organization here in Hungary, mainly for the youth. They're not actually a political party. They're nonpartisan between Fidesz and Jobbik, for instance, because some of their members are members of both parties and supporters of both. So they're nonpartisan when it comes to parties on the right in Hungary. But they're quite sizable, and they hold a lot of events. And this Sunday, they said they would be very honored if Arktos and Right On would send a representative for this ceremony. So I attended, and it was about 45 minutes long, and it was in front of a statue in a park over on the Buda side of the city of two World War I era soldiers, Hungarian soldiers. And I presented a wreath on behalf of Arktos and myself. And I can't say too much about the contents of the ceremony because my Hungarian isn't good enough to tell you everything that was said, but I mean, I certainly got the feeling of it. And they played music, they played some old Hungarian songs, and it was quite a nice occasion, actually. And afterwards, we went into the forest and we spent the rest of the afternoon having some barbecue and drinking a few beers and talking about politics and philosophy, traditionalism, so forth. Oh, that's something very interesting, by the way. The HVIM is a strongly traditionalist organization in the sense of Évola and Guénon. So we discussed some of those issues with the leadership. That was nice. And I should also mention that coming up this Saturday, June 4th, is actually, what would it be? I guess the 96th anniversary of the Treaty of Trianon, which it was like the Versailles Treaty that ended the First World War for the other powers, but this one applied specifically to Hungary. And the biggest consequence and longest lasting consequence of this treaty for Hungary was the fact that it lost about 70% of its territory in this treaty, which included Transylvania, present-day Croatia, parts of Ukraine, parts of Austria. There's a whole lot of territory that was lost as a result of this treaty. And it's something that for people on the right in Hungary and for Hungarian nationalists that still smarts. And while they certainly don't take issue with the fact that they celebrate it, I recognize that it is controversial with Hungary's neighbors because there's sort of this yearning to restore what is called Greater Hungary. In fact, I should mention that HVIM, 64 counties, there aren't 64 counties in Hungary today. That refers to the number of counties in pre-Trianon Hungary. And today they do have chapters in Transylvania and elsewhere in the formerly Hungarian territories. But yeah, I recognize that this is controversial because, of course, some people would claim, well, this is intra-European imperialism and they want to reassert dominance over their neighbors or at least parts of their neighbors' territories. Although I believe all of Croatia was actually at one time part of Hungary. So I can understand why the Croatians...
Well, I don't think it was. I mean, I think it was part of the Habsburg Empire. But, then again, that's a bit different, isn't it?
Yes, but I can understand why nationalists and just ordinary people in Hungary's neighboring countries are a bit suspicious. While at the same time, I understand for the Hungarians, their position is that there's still a lot of ethnic Hungarians living in these territories. I mean, to the tune of millions of people.
Sure.
So, it's quite difficult for them that for almost a century now, they, especially since many Hungarians in Hungary today have relatives who live in these lost territories. It's presented a lot of problems for families and for the Hungarian community in general. So I can understand it from both sides.
Yeah.
But for those who happen to be in Hungary this weekend, I know that HVIM is planning a march from Heroes Square. Again, I think it starts at 4 p.m. So it might be interesting to come out and see them.
Yeah.
But it's,
I mean, I get that, and I also appreciate the fact that you guys are living there and etc. But is this really sort of a good idea these days to have these kinds of manifestations?
Well, I have been told before by people from America and so forth. They say we should be stressing things that build more intra-European brotherhood and cooperation rather than things that drive people apart. I think that's true. And if Hungary was actually calling for war to regain these territories, I mean, obviously that's not something I would support. But their position is that they just
it's the best way to piss off the Romanians forever.
Well, the Romanians and the Hungarians, I mean, there's no love lost between them anyway. Whether
I know,
but
they still have to get along.
Well, that's true, but I when it comes to things like this, however, I can understand that that their position is that they think there should be referendums in the areas where Hungarians are a majority, about what country they belong to. So they at least want to pursue it democratically.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't take any position on it myself because I'm not ethnically Hungarian and so forth. But it's interesting nonetheless, and I think it's easy as an outsider to sort of be dismissive of it. But I can, like I said before, I can understand their position that when they're actually separated from their own relatives and other Hungarians.
I'm sticking my neck out here. I realize that, but I think we have to be dismissive of it by now, because it is a thing of the past, and we are facing such horrible problems with the mass immigration to Europe from people from completely different cultures, different races, what have you. So I really don't think this is the kind of thing that can go on any longer.
Well, fair enough. I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, when I'm living in another,
I'm not disrespecting the Hungarians in this case. Don't get me wrong, but I really do think we have to sort of put a stop to this fratricidal.
Oh, I don't think that will happen in Hungary anytime soon, I have to say. But I mean, I as an American, when I'm living in another country, I just take it as my view. Americans are already interfering enough in the affairs of others, so I don't, I don't try to take a position on these things either way. I find it interesting.
You don't want to lecture people. I mean, that's fair enough, and we get that. But what's your take on it, Daniel?
Well, I don't think this is a question that ought to be pursued at the moment, since European unity is the most important thing right now, since we kind of have to cooperate to face this civilizational challenge that we are faced with right now, basically. But in the long term, I think they have valid claims to these territories, and I don't think the Trianon Treaty after the First World War was justified. I mean, it was basically even worse than the Versailles Treaty for Germany, and therefore it wasn't justified after the Second World War either. And so I definitely understand from like an outsider's point of view the Hungarian claim to these territories, but with that said, I don't think it's something that should be pursued at this moment, and also it's not
No, and I mean, this is it. I mean, I can understand it as well. Possibly, I'm not taking sides in this conflict because it's not mine in any way. But is it at this moment in time? Is it sort of a valid or a relevant rallying point? I mean, I guess that's the sort of question we have to.
It is for Hungarians, and I understand that they want to keep it in the collective memory of their people. They don't want to just let it lapse. So from their perspective, it makes sense. But I mean, certainly HVIM and other Hungarian nationalist groups have been holding many more events in relation to the migrant crisis and so forth. So it's not that they're neglecting those issues in favor of things like this. But I mean, June 4th is the anniversary and they want to mark it in some way. So, I think from their point of view, it's certainly something that Hungarians are very concerned with. So, in terms of domestic politics, I think it makes sense. But you're right. So, I mean, certainly. Well, I should mention, maybe many listeners who don't follow Hungary don't know this, but just last December, the Romanian government accused the leader of one of the Transylvanian chapters of HVIM of planning to carry out terrorist attacks in Romania. And he's actually still in jail right now, as I think a number of other people from HVIM are. And, of course, their position is that the Romanian government fabricated these charges in order to, kind of try to dispense with these people and, stick them away somewhere, which... I don't know enough about it to say on either side, although I find it very hard to believe, that these people would actually be planning terrorist attacks. Although, of course, I don't know the people actually involved. I've never met the ones in Transylvania, but certainly judging from the ones I know here, I have a very hard time imagining that. Yeah, it could be.
No, I think that's right. And I mean, just to sort of underline my point, I can understand where sort of people are coming from, but we do have a problem here because in one way, the Eastern European countries, as we've said time and time again, are sort of leading lights to the rest of Europe. But they are unfortunately sort of stuck in these ancient, as I said, fratricidal conflicts, and that is a problem.
Well, but I would argue that I don't know that it's possible to have one without the other. I mean, the reason that they're more nationalistic is because they've held on to these old values. And of course, the negative side of that, from our perspective, as more European nationalists, you might say, or pan-European nationalists, is that they do hold on to these old rivalries. But it's very difficult to take the high road, I think, for most people. I mean, those of us who are sort of on the more intellectual side of the right, we can take the long view and say, we should be addressing these other issues. But I can understand for the average Hungarian who's sympathetic to nationalism, to them, this is a very important issue, and they probably would think that if somebody wasn't talking about it, that they're not really nationalist. I imagine this goes for a lot of the East European countries.
Yeah, no, I can understand that too. But I mean, I've seen firsthand how Poles and especially Germans from the East can't sort of sit in the same room together because they hate each other so much, and yet they have so much more in common than with most of the rest of the world, and they really need to unite right now.
I agree, and I think it's an unfortunate state of affairs. But I also have to say that being active in Arctos and Right-On for many years now, I've met nationalists from almost every European country, and when you talk to the people who are more sympathetic to what we might call the new right ideas, or the real right, as Daniel calls it, we have these intellectual leaders in every country, and I almost never come across people who say that, it's this, internal struggle, with other European countries and peoples that should take precedence. I mean, almost all of them that I've talked to have said that we have to have this kind of European consciousness. So that gives me hope that maybe down the road, you'll see that more. But at least for now, I mean, like I said, if they were actually calling for war or something to try to reclaim these territories, I would never support that. But I think it's just more they want people to remember that this happened, and they don't want to just let it kind of fall by the wayside.
Which is inflammatory for their neighbors, and so it goes on and on.
But their neighbors do the same kinds of things, so it's
of course they do.
Like I said, it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of the situation. I think.
Sure.
We can.
And I can agree with John there. I haven't seen any huge signs of national chauvinism either from any of our contacts in either Germany or Hungary and Romania or any other countries, basically.
Quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And most people tend to have this pan-European perspective, and especially now since the migrant crisis struck Europe last year, it has been even less than before. I remember that I saw a lot more of these problematic views like 10 years ago than I do today. I think the migrant crisis and the non-European migration to Europe in general have been very helpful in pushing the European countries and cultures closer together, because it's very obvious that we have much more things that unites us and divides us when we are faced with these civilizational threats of the migrant crisis.
This is kind of my point, and I'm not trying to be sort of overly optimistic, but I do think that this will be, if you look in 10 years' time, this is going to be a thing of the past. Also in, Hungary and Poland and Romania and Bulgaria.
Perhaps, but they don't see it that way.
Not yet, no. But I think it will be.
Yeah, I think you might be right, but it's part of their historical consciousness.
Of course it is, and I don't want to take
blame them
that
for not wanting to.
No, and I don't want to take that away from them. But at the same time, we've had a very, very infected relationship with the Danes, for example. I mean, do you have a problem with Danes, Daniel?
No, not really.
No,
the Finns though, they are. no, but I do think that we have.
They're different kettle of fish, so.
Although
we have had a much more infected relationship with the Finns than with the Norwegians or the Danes.
Well, not so much with the Norwegians, but with the Danes earlier on, and certainly with the Russians. But I don't think that's so bad.
There is some sort of hostility towards Swedes in Finland still.
Yeah.
Which can be objectively understood, considering the fact that they were basically a Swedish colony before,
they used to be a Swedish upper class in Finland, and this a lot of foreigners are sort of not aware of. But some 5% of the Finnish population used to be Swedish speakers. And just Swedish speakers, and they used to sort of constitute the elite for centuries, and some Finns still sort of resent this, but yeah,
exactly. Resentment is a very good term to describe this. These attitudes among some Finnish people, and I think it's more common within the Finnish left than any other political groups.
And and you had a bloody civil war in Finland fairly late as well, 1919 to 20, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Well, of course, the most unfortunate manifestation of the sort of thing you're talking about, Jonas, has been the Ukrainian-Russia situation, which I have to say, when I was there in early 2014, I really didn't get a sense of this kind of virulent anti-Russian sentiment. Maybe it was just the people that I was meeting with, but when the thing developed into this bloody conflict that it turned into, I was actually taken by surprise. I guess some people listening would probably attribute that to my naivety, which is possible. But certainly there, I think that's the most unfortunate situation. And I think both sides have contributed to it, actually. And of course, there's outside powers like the U.S.
Sure.
manipulating things. But certainly there was this underlying problem that
and
came to light.
it's very, very difficult for us to understand. So we just have to accept that, I guess, that, you know, we can't sort of thoroughly analyze this. We can't project sort of our own ideologies or ideas to what's going on in that part of the world.
Yes, yeah, it's true. It's unfortunate, but it just seems to be like something that will persist no matter what arguments you try to present.
True.
Yeah, I don't know, but it just goes to show that, you know, these conflicts, even though, I mean, I think the feeling after the Cold War ended was that, you know, at least in Europe, you know, war was soon going to be something obsolete. Like, I remember people referring to the war in Yugoslavia as, you know, the last European war, ? And, you know, things like that. But it wasn't, and, you know, unfortunately, you know, I hope we don't see more of these, but it may be inevitable. I don't know.
No, I mean, obviously, we all hope for these nations to be happy and prosperous and what have you. I think what's going to happen, though, is that they will be hit by the sort of New World Order agenda, and they will be hit by mass immigration pretty badly. I mean, we've been in a kind of piecemeal kind of way in all of Western Europe and I guess the US and Australia as well, whereas Hungary, Poland, Romania haven't really sort of done the multicultural experience yet.
I'd have to disagree in that Hungary's definitely been targeted. They've been resisting it so far, but in recent years, there's, you know, been definitely a consciousness growing that, you know, there are external powers trying to force a particular ideology onto things.
Yeah, no, but that's a slightly different thing. I mean, I'm not suggesting in any way that the leaders would be naive or ignorant about sort of what's going on. But I don't think the population has sort of had to suffer really from the consequences of it yet.
No, not yet. Well, perhaps in Budapest a bit, but in Hungary generally, no, I don't think they've felt it.
No, but I mean, you know, compared to Sweden or the Netherlands or France or Britain or wherever, I mean, it's not too bad.
No.
No, it's not. Anyways, we're halfway through the podcast now, so it's time for a break. So we'll have some music and we'll get back to you after the break.
Buchanan, Richard Lynn, Sam Dixon, Mike Levin, Jared Taylor, Joseph Sobrin, Peter Brimelow, Larry Astor, Arthur Jensen, Samuel Francis, Philip Russian, Charles Murray, Murray Rothbard, Gavin and Jim Goad. Culture wars, bell curve, LA riots hit a nerve, neocons usurp the right, cities fall into white flight, 9/11 Iraq, economic setback, soon the white race feels the pain of 2 terms of hope and change. We didn't start the movement, though our generation might just save our nation, since we're unhucked and hell-bent. Tone it down, they urged us, for our spines they purged us. Steve Saylor, Ramsey Paul, Guillaume Thye, Ryan Falk, Richard Spencer, Countercurrents, Red Ice Radio, Colin Little, Marlon New, Dr. Hoppe, Sean Lestu, HBD, Chick, Millennial Woes, Safe Spaces, Gamergate, Decadence accelerates, Fat Acceptance, Occupy, Chick-fil-A and Brendan Nye, Slut Walks, grabbing guns, wedding cakes for lesbians, privilege checked, white folks decked, Davos are the suspect. We didn't start the movement, though our generation might just save our nation, since we're unhucked and hell-bent. Tone it down, they urged us, for our spines they purged us. Tea Party, attacking Mag, Derbyshire, Rich One Sag, Bronco fights for liberty, shut up by the GOP. Trayvon is Obama's son, white see that we're overrun, start to find our pride again at MPINM ran. in the fight, gonna keep their countries wide. Orban stopped the Syrians, wouldn't let the Muzzies in. Marianne Le Pen is hot, Hillary for sure is not. Coulter warns us we're not far from adios America. Disparate impact, countries gay, Dixie flag is thrown away. Merkel overseas, Europe swarmed by refugees. Charlie Hebdo, Rotherham, ISIS burning down the land. In time seen near, Jenner's Woman of the Year. Freddie Gray, Mike Brown, Black Lives Matter on the town. Ferguson set aflame, what's that toll we ought to blame?
You didn't start the movement, but your generation might just save the nation. You're everything we hoped for. Lefties' heads are spinning cause they know we're winning.
Suddenly Trump's on the scene, master ad dog whistling. Border wall, Muslim ban, race crime stats and Putin fan. GOP can't shut him down, rhetoric makes leftists frown. Hopeful that our race might live, we troll the conservatives. Hordes of normies see the light, start to flock to the alt-right. Muslim nature aptly shown in Paris, Brussels and Cologne. Trump is now our nominee, next he'll take down Hillary. SPLC planning here, thinking it's the current year.
You didn't start the movement, though your generation might just save our nation. Since we're uncut and hell-bent, and this year has shown that we have only grown and 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 grown.
And there we're back from the break. Joining me today, we have John and Jonas. And Jonas, what have you been up to lately?
Not much, really. I did go into Kirkwall, which is the capital of the Orkney Islands, yesterday, though, and there was quite an event. It was the the centennial commemoration of the Battle of Jutland, which was a naval battle that was actually held outside of Denmark. But the commemoration was held here in Orkney because the British North Sea Fleet was based here during both the First and Second World Wars. And I mean, that was nice. You had David Cameron up here and Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish Prime Minister, and Prince Philip was supposed to come, but he apparently, he couldn't make it for health reasons, and that's understandable. I mean, he's 95-ish, so yeah, interesting to see.
Did you actually see these people with your own eyes, or?
Yeah. No, it's a very small place. I mean, it's
okay.
I think Kirkwall would have like 7,000 inhabitants, so it's not a great.
It's a very nice little city, kind of medieval styled or something.
Yeah. No, it's nicely sort of proportioned, but it's not that populated. So no. So yeah, you could see all of this, but I have to admit though, and without being sort of overly sentimental, what kind of touched me a bit was to see all these young kids there for the parade, and they would be, I guess, 18, 19, 20, and the government is now sort of making a thing of it's 100 years ago we had this awful war, but they're going to send these kids off to wars in the Middle East or Northern Africa or wherever. To die, be maimed, leave 20-year-old widows in Sheffield or Wolverhampton. It just makes me sick, the hypocrisy of it, I have to say.
All for the sake of globalization or whatever
democracy or
order, yes.
Yeah, and you live basically on a smaller island, not too far from the mainland. I mean, the so-called mainland, it's actually a big island, the biggest island in the Orkney island group. It's like 1 hour away by ferry or something, or half an hour.
no, it's more like if it's a direct ferry, it's an hour and a half, but you know.
Yeah, okay.
But it's kind of an island community, so it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that you were commenting in the first half about this problem in Eastern Europe of them clinging to these old rivalries, but actually, wouldn't you say that ceremony was? Well, I don't think any of us probably think very highly of Cameron, but would you? I imagine you at least agreed with this sentiment of as the cliche goes, no more brothers' wars.
No, I think that's
subtext of the.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, John, and I think you're right. That's one of the, because we're always we're always complaining about politicians and we're criticizing and etc. But there are positive aspects of what's going on as well, and I would say this is one of them. We certainly don't want to see animosity between the Germans and the French or the English ever again, or any other people for that matter, but certainly not the sort of nations that have been pillars of our civilization. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that here. It's just unfortunate that this point has to be made by these politicians who are actually in many ways traitors to Europe by enabling the migrant crisis and so forth.
Yeah, but for once they're right on something.
Yeah, well, nobody is wrong all the time, I guess. Well,
this is it. Yeah.
That's and for the listeners who haven't actually been to Orkney, I can mention that it's a very nice and peaceful and quaint little island group, and it's you basically don't have any migrants there, do you, Jonas?
No, we don't. No, it's pretty poor, but it's kind of protected by its seas. You don't move here for the weather or for the food, because it's shit in both cases. But otherwise, it's a good place to raise kids and etc. Yeah.
What is the food like there?
The same could be said about the entire Scandinavia, by the way. But we have other things.
No, the food's
attracting
not that bad.
migrants.
The food's good in Sweden, though.
Yeah, I would say it's not bad in Stockholm and Gothenburg, at least.
No, it's quite good in Sweden. I would testify to that. But I do think that British food is quite all right as well. I mean, especially the breakfast, the English breakfast.
Yeah, that's that they do that well, but I'd say that's about it in my experience.
Oh, fish and chips are pretty all right as well. But anyways, let's not linger around that topic. When it comes to current events in general, I mean, I haven't actually done anything personally the past week that is worth mentioning, but I have actually been following the news, and of course, especially the news reports regarding the American presidential election, which is it's obviously the most entertaining presidential election to date. And thanks to Trump, of course, and also thanks to his almost 100% guaranteed opponent, Hillary Clinton, who's pretty much the worst candidate the Democrats have had so far. And with Trump being the best candidate the Republicans have had so far, it kind of lays the foundation for a pretty interesting election. But something I've really enjoyed watching this past few days is the Donald Trump press conferences in the Trump Tower in New York, where he attacks the media. We can start by listening to that, and we'll comment briefly on it afterwards.
I think you've set a new bar today for being contentious with the press corps, kind of calling us losers to our faces and all that.
No, not all of you, just many of you.
All right, fine. Enough of us. Is this what?
Not you, David.
Is this what it's going to be like covering you if you're president?
Yeah, it is.
Let me tell you something. We're going to have this kind of confrontation in the press room?
Okay, yeah, it is going to be like this, David. If the press writes false stories, like they did with this, because, half of you are amazed that I raised all of this money. If the press writes false stories, like they did where I wanted to keep a low profile, I didn't want the credit for raising all this money for the vets. I wasn't looking for the credit. And by the way, more money is coming in. I wasn't looking for the credit. But I had no choice but to do this because the press was saying I didn't raise any money for them. Not only did I raise it, much of it was given a long time ago. And there is a vetting process, and I think you understand that. But when I raise almost $6 million, and probably in the end we'll raise more than 6 because more is going to come in and is coming in. But when I raise 5.6 million as of today, more is coming in. And this is going to phenomenal groups. And I have many of these people vetting the people that are getting the money and working hard. And then we have to read probably libelous stories, or certainly close, in the newspapers. And the people know the stories are false. I'm going to continue to attack the press. Look, I find the press to be extremely dishonest. I find the political press to be unbelievably dishonest. I will say that. Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
This is Right On Radio.
Regarding the press comments, well, he was attacking the media, and it definitely in the most vicious way that I've heard any presidential candidate do. I mean, many presidents and candidates over the years have had contentious relationships with the media and occasionally call them out, but I've never heard anything quite on the level of what Trump was saying, although that's kind of been the defining characteristic of his campaign, is he's kind of taken things to another level. I mean, I remember during the Bush years, especially, Bush was very unpopular, and he always had but yes, I think it's something that you see as being more characteristic of Republicans. Certainly Democratic presidents as well have also had problems with the media. I mean, I don't think that there's any inherent. Well, I take that back. There is an inherent bias in the media towards the left, obviously, but I also know that when the media smells blood and they know they have a good story that will get a lot of readers or listeners or viewers or whatever, they'll go for it. So, even though they're all on board for Hillary right now, I'm quite sure that if she gets elected and her presidency ends up being a disaster, they'll tear her apart as well. But certainly they tend to be more brutal to the Republican candidates in these elections. But I would say at the same time as well, though, with Trump, I don't know that the Trump phenomenon would have been possible without the media, actually, because I think it was last summer they started playing all these clips of him. And I think that their idea was that people would laugh at him and probably not take him seriously, but it obviously had the opposite effect because it really galvanized the Trump train, as they call it. So, even though he's saying this about the media, and I'm sure they are going to be very unkind to him in the months ahead, at the same time, I'm not saying he should be grateful to them, but I definitely think it's the case that without the media coverage of him last summer, he wouldn't be where he is now.
Absolutely, and he really knows how to play into this. I mean, he knows how the liberal media works, and he knows what kind of statements to make to get free coverage. And he's been using this to his advantage really well so far, and I'm quite sure he will continue to do so. I mean, he will face more opposition for sure after everything has been really finished when it comes to the primaries next Tuesday. But yeah, the media is obviously more favorable to Hillary than to him, but still, considering the fact that Hillary is so corrupt and she doesn't, from what I can see, do that well in debates, and she's actually been avoiding press conferences for almost half a year, 180 days, I think, today. And then, so because she is afraid of all the difficult questions she will get regarding the email scandal that is kind of brewing right now, and it might very well end with her facing indictment for some things with regards to this. That was at least the recommendations from the investigators, from what I've heard.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I guess, as I've said before, you have to ask yourself, are the media sort of strategic enough to be bigging this guy up in order to make the Republicans or a Republican candidate an impossible choice in the next election? I don't know. I mean, I think he's probably more genuine and he's more funny than most of the other people, and he's certainly someone I'd prefer to Hillary Clinton any day. But you know, I'm just not.
Yeah, I think he will surely do well against Hillary, especially considering the email scandal that has been brewing for a while, as I mentioned before. And
do you think people care about that?
I think they do. I mean,
yes.
people care about corruption, and this kind of corruption that Hillary has been involved with is so huge. I mean, it's such a big thing. I mean, in May, a book called named Clinton Cash was released by one of the Breitbart editors, and a documentary is coming out, I think, in just a week or two, based on that book, and that will be a huge detriment to her campaign. I'm quite sure of that, even if she doesn't end up facing indictment, which is still quite.
Would it sort of have that kind of influence on the Black or Mexican vote, or the Jewish money, which is basically Jewish vote, which is an euphemism for Jewish money?
Well, but something you have to keep in mind, like with Obama, I mean, it wasn't Black Americans who got Obama into office. I mean, they're only 13% of the population. It was mainly white liberals who put Obama in office. And the hardcore of her supporters are going to support her no matter what, because it would have been the case no matter who the Republican was. But now that it's Trump, I mean, I think that if it came out that she was, molesting children or something, they would continue to support her, because they will want to do anything to prevent Trump from getting into office. So, but they will not, I mean, that hardcore of her supporters, that's not who she's going to have to win over. I mean, it's the rest of the country that could go, many voters could go either way, I'm sure. So that's where it's going to present a problem for her. She'll never lose her base unless, something really drastic comes out. And even if it did, they probably just make excuses for it. So, but I mean, it will make a difference as far as those people who could go either way. I mean, some Americans are diehard conservatives and some are diehard liberals, but there's a great mass of people in the middle who, go back and forth in each election, which is why the results of every election are different.
Yeah, for those of us who aren't American but who are sort of curious about it, is that a regional thing, or is it a class thing, or sort of what is it? What sort of constitutes the divide in political outlook in the US?
As far as Democrats and Republicans?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any reliable predictor on that. I mean, certainly you can characterize certain regions in a particular way. But, there are also, of course, places that go in either direction. I mean, New York is, of course, thought of as a bastion of liberalism, which it is. But at the same time, I mean, they've, certainly for, 12 years or 16 years, I forget how long it was, New York was governed by Rudy Giuliani and then Michael Bloomberg, who were both Republicans. So it's not that, a conservative not that they were they were very strong conservatives, but by American standards they were. And so it's certainly not the case that only a Democrat has a chance in New York. But I mean, you can certainly characterize certain regions. I don't think class is a particularly reliable indicator, because certainly these days the Republicans have managed to tap into a lot of the working class rage. I mean, Trump has been brilliant at it, but even Republicans before him certainly benefited from that. Of course, I think wealthy Americans tend to support Republicans unless they're ideologically committed to the left. But that's probably class isn't the best predictor in the U.S. when it comes to that sort of thing. Region would be a better one, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and how would you sort of localize that?
Well, if you look at the results of the last few national elections, it's pretty clear. I mean, you see there's basically a strip of blue, which is the color they use for the Democrats, down the West Coast, and another strip down the East Coast, and maybe a couple of states in the middle that are blue, and the rest of the country is solid red. And that's really been the genius of the Republicans, was that, until I guess it was about the 70s or so, the South was always traditionally strongly Democratic. The genius of the Republicans has been that they've basically managed to tie together all the rural parts of the country. So now you see the South and most of the Midwest and the far West are all voting Republican for the most part. I mean, the only reason why liberals continue to have such strong representation of the government is because, of course, those states tend to have smaller populations. So they don't get as many electoral votes in the elections as the big states like California and New York do. But I would say, if you look geographically, certainly most of the country is very strongly conservative at this point.
Except for the big cities, which are the most important ones, of course. I mean, the big city states like California and New York, and so forth.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, they have the coasts. But if you look at almost the entire rest of the country, the Democrats really don't win very much. I mean, when Bush was elected, it was, like I said, you could see a strip down the east and the west coasts, and the whole rest of the country was a sea of red. So yeah, that's the Republicans. I think I said this in a previous podcast, but for a while now they've been implicitly the party of white Americans. But what Trump is doing is making it explicit. But it's that trend has been there for a long time now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very true. And this might very well be the last chance for white America to elect someone who represents them, I guess.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, a year ago, I wouldn't have thought it was even possible for Trump to succeed with the message he's had, but he's clearly tapped into something. So it remains to be seen where that will lead. But certainly, it's the only glimmer of hope that there's been in American politics from our perspective in my lifetime. There's no question of that.
Yeah, that's very true. And even if he doesn't win, he has still done us a huge favor so far. I mean,
absolutely.
By attacking the media, by bringing immigration to the debate stage, and making it the most important question of this election, it's a huge service to our movement. And and I hope it will get him all the way to the White House. But even if it doesn't, it's of course still a pretty huge victory for us.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And I think it will, actually. I think it will get into the White House if something really, really unexpected doesn't happen.
We'll see, but I mean, it's Hillary, like I said, she does have a very strong core of supporters, and the people who like the sorts of social benefits that the Democrats are identified with will support her no matter what. So, she's going to have those people and a lot of the minorities and possibly a lot of women as well against, on her side and against Trump. So I don't think it's going to be easy for Trump, but I certainly think it's possible for him to win. But it's really too early to say. I mean, the election's 5 months away still, and the conventions haven't even happened yet. So we'll just have to see how the next few months go.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it's the women in America that is basically Hillary's only hope. Because I've seen a lot of women that said that they're voting for her only because of the fact that she's a woman. And yeah.
But the same people who supported Obama will support Hillary.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying 100%, but.
Yeah, but I mean, as we've said before, and I mean, we have discussed this previously, but I mean, if you look at Obama, say what you will, but he turned out to be probably the most sort of rational, sane, moderate US president since, well, Carter, I would say, you know?
On some positions, he certainly
Yeah.
was quite moderate, I would say. Yeah, he wasn't a complete disaster, but of course, in terms of foreign policy,
Whereas, someone like, Bush came across as fairly, I'm a conservative kind of guy. I'm moderately intelligent and
well, a conservative who oversaw the biggest revamp of the U.S. government in since World War II. That's a fact that they didn't mention at the time, but I mean that the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and everything that went along with that was unprecidented.
Yeah.
As well as the powers that he granted, in terms of surveillance.
You're talking about Bush Junior or Senior?
Bush Jr., of course.
No, and this guy who everyone thought would be sort of, a fairly harmless person, he turned out to be a bloody disaster for his country and for the world.
Well, a lot of people saw it, early on, but of course, 9/11 was the factor that nobody could have anticipated. But I would have to say, I mean, I'm certainly no lover of Obama, but he was certainly better than Bush.
Well, he turned out to be, actually. I mean, even though he was a leftist and he was this and that and the other, but at the end of the day, I don't think he was too bad.
Well, I would disagree with that. Actually, I mean, he's definitely been bad for the white population in America, and he's also not been that great in terms of foreign policy. I mean, it was under Obama that Libya happened and Syria. And
well, that was actually Hillary who pushed Libya. That came out in these emails of hers.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not saying it's been great. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying he was probably better than Bush,
but that's not hard to do.
No. In all fairness, no.
In terms of foreign policy, I think it's very difficult to be worse than Bush. But,
yes.
Yeah. But I mean, Obama, with the difference that Obama has been much worse for the American middle class. I mean, the white middle class of America, he's been horrible. I mean, he's been pushing this HBTQ agenda, and gay marriage was legalized under his term, and now they have this gender neutral.
Well, he didn't have any influence on that, but he was president when that happened. It's true.
No. I mean, I
yeah, and I mean,
he's been catastrophic in most ways, but as I've said previously, when it comes to foreign policy, which is, with all due respect, John, what interests us non-Americans most, I think he's been more sort of beneficial to the world than his predecessors.
Well, do you really think so, though? I mean, he kind of just traded Bush's policy of all-out invasion for, well, okay, let's just do things by proxy, by aiding subversive groups and using drones and special forces and airstrikes and things like that. I mean, was there really a significant difference?
I think he's been an asshole in Syria and in Libya and etc. But I do think he got tired of that, and he tried to do something about Syria before it got too late. So the only reason why we don't have a proper regime change in Damascus is, I think, because he said no. This is quite rare. Yeah.
Well, I think part of what happened there, too, was that all this stuff came out about the fact that ISIS was benefiting from a lot of the things that Washington was doing. So they were kind of forced into a position where they had to pull back a bit from. Well, I think to this day, they're still insisting that Assad step down. But
I'm sure they are.
The rhetoric has certainly decreased over the years.
Yeah, but I mean, don't get me started on ISIS, because I mean that is one very, very strange entity. So and they haven't appeared out of the blue, not in that part of the world, not this day and age. Yeah.
Well, we've kind of gone far afield from the original point. But the other thing I wanted to mention about Trump, though, that was interesting was 6 days ago, he was giving Trump was giving an interview to, I think it was Bloomberg Business Insider. And he said to the interviewer that he imagines that in 5 or 10 years, the Republican Party is going to become a workers' party in the U.S., which I thought was a very interesting comment. It's not something you would expect to hear from a man who's built his reputation on being a huge capitalist. But when he says that, I mean, he's obviously expecting that he's going to be the leader of the Republican Party over the next 5 to 10 years. So,
what are they perceived as today? As some
as the party of the what do they say, the 2%? Or whatever. But I mean, what Trump has managed to do is, tap into this working class and primarily white anger in the U.S. And he's been calling for protectionism, and of course, anti-immigration policies would help the American worker as well. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting comment from him to say that. I think since I'm always someone who thought that the right should, I mean, if you're a nationalist and you believe in your people, you should believe that you want to support all of your people. And if Trump can actually make the Republican Party not just serve come up with a better foreign policy, but also serve the interests of the American working class more completely as well, I think that will be fantastic. Daniel, do you have any? I don't know. I guess I don't know if you'd heard about this before I brought it up, but.
Yeah, of course. I've heard about this before. And I think so as well. I think a large portion of the American working class, not only the white part of it, but also the Hispanic and blacks will actually realize that it's in their interest to vote for Trump, since he is the only one basically interested in protecting American jobs from being relocated abroad, which Hillary will not do. I mean, she's been in favor of these multinational trade agreements, the NAFTA agreement, for example, and so forth. And she's not really pushing this issue at all. I mean, bringing back jobs. Trump is repeating this always in pretty much every speech. So, yeah, the more intelligent part of the working class will probably be more inclined to vote for Trump, since they will realize it's in their interests.
I think so, too.
What about the sort of working class in up in the north, from, well, say your neck of the woods, John? I mean, they used to be sort of Irish, Italian, blue collar workers and Democrats, but still fairly conservative when it came to values and stuff. They certainly weren't progressive, shall we say. Has that changed completely, or is
No. Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot fewer workers in those, like New York and Michigan, the two states that I've lived in back in the U.S. Obviously, there's a lot fewer workers these days than there once were, but it's still certainly a substantial element, and I think a lot of them still continue to vote Democrat because a lot of these people are unionized. And the unions tell them how to vote. And the fact is that the unions have always been on the side of the Democrat, whoever it was. But I think you are seeing a shift, because I think a lot of workers are beginning to wake up to the fact that the Democratic Party isn't really representing their interests. So I couldn't give you any numbers, but that's my sense of what's happening. And Michigan, I have to say, often does vote Democratic in the elections. But the reason is really only because of the Detroit area. And if you took that out, Michigan is a strongly conservative state. And the reason why the Detroit area is so strongly Democratic isn't because the people there are very liberal. They're not for the most part. It's mainly because there's still a lot of working class people in those areas. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but I think that's slowly starting to change.
So, if we look at people in the Midwest, you'd say that a lot of them sort of still Democrat out of habit, or no?
It's hard for me to say. I haven't been back in a while now. So I don't.
Sure.
Trump has really changed the game. I was talking with Richard Spencer about this recently, and we were saying that I think it's sometimes hard for non-Americans to understand the Trump phenomenon. Well, it's probably hard for a lot of Americans too. But I mean, it really is changing the game. I mean, whether this will be a permanent thing or this is just a passing thing,
No, I think it's incomprehensible to be honest. And so many people that I do find intelligent commentators still do find that this is not just a passing thing. This is something that one should take seriously.
Well, regardless of whether Trump wins or not, I think what it indicates is that there's a shift in the American political consciousness going on. And I think Bernie Sanders represents the same thing, even though he's been less successful. It's just that we've been getting the same sort of standard phrases and ideas from these people now for decades, and it's just not enough anymore. I think still, I mean, the decisive element in American politics is still the white population. I mean, whites are still 70% of the U.S. Still most of the people who are registered to vote and who are the most highly educated are still white Americans. And I think that it's just an indication that people are starting to recognize that the policies of the two parties over the last 20 or 30 years are not helping them. That some sort of change needs to come about. And I think that's why you have Trump and Sanders.
We are drawing to a close here. So thank you for listening, everyone. Take care. Bye.